Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by Aqua Security. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting panel ahead, but before we get things started, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to run through with you. First of all, today's session is being recorded. So if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with your team, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand shortly after we conclude our session today. Now, if you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of options to do so. The first option is the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So if you see that chat tab, I'd like you to test it out for us by letting us know from where in the world you are joining us today. Now, if you have any specific questions for our panel, we do want you to send those in to the Q&A, which is directly to the right side of that chat panel. Sending in your questions to the Q&A helps us keep track, and we do have plenty of time set aside for a formal Q&A session at the end, so be sure to send in as many questions as you have. Now, if you jump over to the polling section, or sorry, not the polls, the handout section, you will see there is a resource there. I believe it's an ebook, so feel free to click on that and grab a download. And of course, before we close things out, I'm giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around to see if you're one of our lucky winners today. So our topic is the evolution of cloud security posture management, and I am joined today by Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Tag Cyber, who is going to take this opportunity to open up and introduce the rest of our panel. So Jill, I'll hand it on over to you.
Welcome to today's webinar, The Evolution of Cloud Security Posture Management, from basic misconfiguration checks to robust cloud security solutions. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Tag Cyber. Joining me for this segment, we have Aaron Stefan, Principal Cloud Security Product Marketer at Aqua Security, as well as John Masserini, Senior Research Advisor at Tag Cyber. For today's agenda, we're going to take a look at the genesis of CSPM, evolutionary stages, key challenges and solutions, advanced CSPM capabilities, and the future of CSPM. This will be followed by an interactive Q&A session. And let's kick it off with you, Aaron. Let's talk about the genesis of CSPM, what it is and how did it come to be?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jill. Thank you for the introduction. So really the idea behind CSPM is simple, right? It came about as the idea to automate security configurations across multi-clouds as security practitioners, as risk practitioners were continuing to grow and the complexity of cloud environments were continuing to grow. In order to meet those changing environments, right, CSPM really enables those practitioners to automatically to detect, to assess, and to really remediate configurations and compliance issues across their multi-cloud accounts. And really, no matter how many there are and how many you use, this is becoming a growing issue, right? It's becoming a bigger and bigger challenge. And so CSPM was really born in the fact of something that was, makes detecting and preventing these misconfigurations simple and easy, and something, in fact, that can be exploited by threat actors, right? If you have seen previous research that the Aqua team Nautilus did, a few months ago, over 250 million artifacts were exposed due to misconfiguration. So these types of challenges continue to become, more and more pressing, and really the need for CSPM first evolved. And if we look at sort of the evolution of CSPM, Jill, if you don't mind sort of hopping to the next slide for us, what we call CSPM 1.0, right? It's sort of, this is the evolution where we started with just this cloud misconfiguration check. So now, John, I'd love to tap you in. I know as an 18-year veteran CISO, you've seen many changes of CSPM solutions, I'm sure, and sort of the challenges and how they've grown quite a bit. Anything you want to share here on sort of when CSPM sort of first came to light and, maybe anything you remember from those early days of just those misconfiguration checks?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, look, cloud, cloud kind of snuck into the enterprise, right? So when the whole DevOps initiatives kicked off, quite frankly, the security folks were caught a little off guard. So, when the CSPM solution started coming out, it was really around understanding what was running in the cloud, really kind of helping the DevOps teams kind of get some controls around it, right? We were very quickly, it seemed, we moved from this kind of perimeter-centric enterprise infrastructure to where kind of we knew what the boundaries were, to now, as you pointed out, right now we're not just in one cloud, right? But we might be running microservices in a completely different cloud offering as we do our workloads, right? So really trying to get an understanding of that, and more importantly, an understanding of the risk. We had to do something, right? So the first, the CSPM 1.0, some of the first ones that hit were really around understanding the configuration of the clouds and how the interaction between the clouds, what risks were kind of exposed to that. And it really, it was just, it was really just around, the cloud environment, really not around the workloads at all.
So John, that's a great point. I think one of the biggest, outlines, even when you look just here on these slides, is there's no workload visibility with CSPM 1.0, right? And so now having to evolve into the next piece, right? And why in fact that happened.
So John, Aaron, thanks so much for that background. And now we're in the process. Did CSPM evolve to include more than just misconfiguration checks? Can you talk to us about the history of agentless scanning? John, we'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, again, when we looked at 1.0, it was really around scanning the cloud environments. And as the products matured, it was really around including some of the workloads or a lot of the functionality that was actually running in the cloud. And, a lot of times, look, I'm an old guy, been doing this for a while. A lot of ways it kind of relates back to how we used to scan for vulnerabilities, right? We would scan on a regular basis. When we saw something, we'd react to it and try to run and fix it. The challenge with that is in a DevOps world where there are, dozens and dozens of releases done throughout the day or throughout the week, that cycle breaks down very quickly, right? So when you start looking at, what we were scanning and everything that was going on, really kind of, it was obvious that the scanning was giving us visibility, but kind of it was ending there because we really didn't, have an easy way to address all of the challenges that very quick and rapid fire release schedule kind of brought into the world.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. And when we look really at CSPM 2.0, right, this is sort of more the present day. And that's really where, to your point, we see this agentless workload scanning come about. And, what is agentless scanning? Jill, to your question earlier, is, it consists of taking these snapshots of the running workloads and scanning them through, the cloud provider's API. And this method is great. And this is why it, sort of came to be so popular, because it gives that quick visibility into what's going on in the cloud workloads. It gives that, real-time assessment of the risk posture, and it detects some, right, but not all. We're detecting our misconfigurations, the vulnerabilities, but what we're missing, and sort of that call out on the slide there, right, is these attacks that happen, in memory, those fileless attacks. And it's really important though, right, because agentless scanning is a core component of CSPM solutions. It helps you discover and map all of your resources. It helps you to identify those misconfiguration checks, right? If we go back to 1.0, it gives you that basic workload visibility and helps you prioritize your risks, but again, not all. And so really what's so important here, and what we'll want to talk about in later slides, is these, there are potential risks in a CSPM 2.0 world. And this is why we're changing, we're evolving, we're growing. And this is really why the evolution of CSPM is so important, and so important to all of you who, are on the call today, evaluating different CSPM solutions and really where we're going.
And Aaron, before we get into CSPM solutions for today, let's examine the current challenges that security practitioners are facing and why they are demanding more from CSPM solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. It's really important to understand, right? Myself, the Aqua team, we just got back from Black Hat. We are at RSA. John, I'm sure you speak to, security professionals day in and day out. And we spend a lot of time just trying to understand, what are the current challenges that are being faced today? And I'm very curious of all of you on the phone, if you agree with sort of these challenges that we've addressed, and some more that we'll talk about in the next slides. But what's really important to know, and what we've heard, as security professionals ourselves, is that cloud security is evolving. It's evolving to meet market demands. Again, if we look back at the slides we just shared, right, sort of these misconfiguration checks or this agentless scanning, but we're not getting a complete view of our risk posture. That last slide showed, about 52%, according to Aqua Team Nautilus research, that misses attacks. Agentless solutions miss attacks that happen in memory, and that's concerning, right? And what really we need is this real-time view of what's going on. We need to understand what is happening below the surface. What type of insights can we use? I'm sure many of you, and I think John will talk about on the next slide, are overwhelmed with tons and tons of alerts, right? And alerts that, may be actionable, may be important, but there's no real understanding of what's top priority. And really what, analysts and, different security professionals are starting to see is that CWPP, so cloud workload protection platforms, and CSPM solutions are really on this convergence path. And we predict, analysts in the field predict that by 2025, these capabilities will start to converge. And why that is because, again, just as misconfiguration checks sort of, had their time and then were not enough, so is agentless scanning. And we really need to be able to go deeper. We need that behavioral threat detection. We need to see below the surface in order for our CSPM solutions to really bring value, and for all of you, and I'm sure your teams, to be able to go and, actionably remediate those most important risks. So, John, as a former CISO, now an industry analyst yourself, can you talk a little bit about, maybe some of the challenges you've seen enterprise organizations face, maybe some that you, in your time as a CISO faced, or others that you speak, daily with other security professionals they may be interacting with today?
Yes, certainly. Look, it's, the challenges are almost exponential, right? Again, previously in our legacy infrastructures, you knew when servers were rolling through the door. They had to go through a process of getting the operating systems loaded, assigned a network address, and all sorts of stuff. So there was a very structured and well-known process to get something up and running in the infrastructure. Today, it's literally just a push of a button and a couple scripts, and you can have an entire, application stack running in minutes. So, having these workloads constantly spinning up, coming down, moving, maybe going to different clouds, it's really challenging when it comes to the alerting side, because it's a flood of information, right? We're already, most security operations centers will tell you they're already overwhelmed with the number of alerts and just the amount of data that they're seeing. So if we just go back to that one slide once, it's really a lot of information that's flowing out of these environments, right? And it is inconsistent. If you're running your microservices on one cloud, a lot of organizations are now finding certain clouds do things better, right? So, one cloud provider might offer microservices and give you more featured functions to run microservices than they do full-blown workloads, where others, are more suited to the legacy kind of, we're going to fire up a Linux image and run with it. So having these different clouds, having, a lot of services now being truly just API driven, it's trying to identify and manage all of this risk. It's becoming very challenging to operationalize. The other thing we always have to kind of get to, and I feel kind of we have to bring up, is the fact that cloud security in and of itself is conceptually new to the security teams, right? The DevOps teams are far more comfortable with the environments and how things are run than the security teams are. So really kind of trying to get up to speed, right? Trying to operationalize all of this data and really understanding how it impacts the risk of the organization is kind of where the focus is. So, there's, again, a lot of fairly new attention by the regulators on how we are managing our clouds, right? So now the security teams are getting kind of a lot more pressure to understand it, to take ownership of it, and to make sure that there's a continual maturation and a continual improvement in that. So, it's really a very unique time when we've seen kind of this whole infrastructure lift and shift from being behind our walls to now being virtualized and up in the cloud. It kind of caught a lot of folks off guard. So, when we go through this process, being able to filter and prioritize and really prove the compliance is absolutely critical.
Let's switch gears a bit for a moment here and talk about the old debate of agent versus agentless solutions and how that impacts where CSPM is heading today.
Yeah, it's some great insight, Jill. And I want to go back, John, to just a point that you made about the previous slide, right? And this sort of Groundhog Day effect and this no improvement. And, again, based on your experience, how challenging was that for you and for your teams? I mean, that had to be, when I'm at trade show booths and I'm talking to customers, that demotivation of not being able to actually make an impact on the day-to-day and not having any insight into prioritization. And I think that will actually lead us in really nicely to sort of where we are today with agentless and how it really hinders that effective prioritization and remediation. But would love any snippet from you on your time with that experience.
Yeah, and honestly, it's trying to trying to fit what we are comfortable with as kind of risk and security professionals into. We're trying to force fit it into a new model, and that's where a lot of that frustration comes from, right? Again, used to be able to say there's a vulnerability over here, go patch it, and when it was patched, we knew it was patched because it disappeared from the reports, right? Now, if someone's going to the repository and they keep firing up workloads that are all based off of something that has a vulnerability, every day these workloads are going to keep firing up, and we're going to say, well, go fix it, and they're going to go fix the workload that they just fired up, but nobody's going to go back and fix kind of the original image. So that lack of understanding, that lack of trying to take the old model and fit it into the new model, that's kind of this Groundhog Day effect. Getting that under control and saying, okay, we understand all this stuff that's currently now running, but let's go fix the original first. Let's go get to the root cause. Go back to GitHub. Fix the policies that we're using to fire up these things. That's a very different model for a lot of security folks. And as the CSPM solutions kind of mature and help us manage that more, is kind of where we're finally able to start making a difference.
Great, thank you. And Jill, if you want to flip, I know I took you a little bit backwards, but yes, if we talk about that, and John, based off your expertise here, right? Like, I think one of the biggest things and one of the biggest misconceptions in the market is that agentless kind of came out of the gate and was like, this is security, this is true security. And what's so important is to understand is that agentless security isn't necessarily security, but it's just this simple visibility. And so it's giving you that snapshot in time, right? It's like, it's a copy of the storage associated with a particular workload. It advanced us, right, from our misconfiguration days. It gave us a little bit more. But today's day and age, exactly what you said, John, it's just not enough. A snapshot that's taken, maybe every 24 hours, or longer, depending on the needs, like, how could that possibly be true security, right? Things are happening in the background almost every second. And really, if you think about, how often a container runs, for example, maybe every 12 hours, depending on the environment, and you're only taking a snapshot every 24, you're really 50-50 on whether you're actually scanning a running container. And that's, that can be a challenge. That should be a challenge, to all of you on the call today. If you're not scanning it, then you're probably not seeing it. And, The second problem with this too, one that we talk a lot about, with our customers, here at Aqua is if an attack targets in memory, if it targets CPU, and if you're not going to see them, then how can you stop it? And so again, I don't mean to bash agentless. That's not the point here. It's a critical component, but it's not everything. And if we're really having this, true conversation today about evolution of CSPM, it's so important to understand that this is just a piece, and it really cannot, agentless scanning alone, right? It can't actually help you prioritize. If we think back to this Groundhog Day, exactly what John was just talking about, if you can't see everything, then it's really almost truly impossible to prioritize what's most important to you. And so again, agentless scanning has come a long way. It goes beyond infrastructure and its configurations, but it's just that partial visibility. So if we think about, and Jill, if you don't mind, if we talk now about where we're going, right, where CSPM has evolved, and what you really need as a security practitioner, as a risk practitioner, to have this true, visibility, is you need an in-workload solution. You need something that can see beyond just the surface level. And so this is really why, a lightweight sensor, a lightweight agent, again, I know, John, you're probably familiar with this. I'd love your input of sort of the agents of the past, right? Of, those are clunky, they're going to bring down my system, but they've come such a long way, right? And like an agent that uses less than 1% of CPU, but can go a little deeper, no custom code required, any of that, but can give you insight that can detect things like zero-day attacks. That's really where we need to be. And John, I'd love your feedback on, I saw that smile there of sort of, where agents have come and gone, and any insight on, your expertise on agents and why they're needed as a key capability for a CSPM solution.
Yeah, and very, very much to the point made, right? If our only kind of approach to security is scanning, then really not understanding what is running in the workload, it's not really it's not really security, right? And we're kind of talking ourselves into a lull, because it doesn't provide what the name of the product says, right? There's no cloud security in just scanning. And I wanted to kind of touch back on something you had said earlier. Another challenge when you do have the scan, right? You had mentioned you scan once every 24 hours and, things that come up and go away in that time period. I think scanning once every 24 hours might even be a lot for many organizations, right? They very quickly found out that there's a hard dollar cost the more you scan, right? There's no reason functionally you could scan once an hour. You could find a lot of these workloads that are running, but that cloud provider that you're passing all that data across and running in that environment, you are going to get a really hefty invoice at the end of that month, right? So a lot of this is, okay, well, if we run it once a day, at least we'll be better than not running it at all. We're going to try to save some money. But in fact, some of them run even less, right? Maybe once every other day or only on the weekends. So having that agent that's on the workload fills that gap, right? Maybe now running once a day is actually more than enough, right? You understand the configuration of the actual cloud environment. You see the workloads from the outside, but having that agent on board is telling you what's going on in the workload, the apps the services that are running there. Aaron, you and I had a long conversation about the fileless, attack structure, attack vector, and it's real, right? The other thing we need to remember is, again, it's a cloud environment. It is by definition accessible to everyone on the internet, right? In some way, shape, or form. So, the whole reason we want that flexibility is to be able to rapidly deploy, rapidly stand up applications. We had, I think I mentioned it, some of the enterprises we talked to do hundreds of releases a week, right? And obviously they're all small and they're all very focused, but there's no way you're patching and keeping up with redeploying an agent, all that kind of stuff. So having that onboard agent that you can build into the development lifecycle that's automatically deployed. When the developers are ready, they push a button, it goes into test, it gets tested, it goes into production. No one's the wiser, but now we're far more secure. And I think that's kind of really one of the biggest benefits of where the whole industry has matured to, is really being able to help us understand what's going on inside the workload, not just kind of scanning from 30,000 feet.
So then to wrap things up here, now that we understand the key capabilities required, where do you think CSPM is headed today?
So, look, it's having that real-time visibility obviously is critical, right? And again, a lot of security folks on the call today, tying it back to that legacy vulnerability scanner, you have to be able to see it to be able to fix it, right? So understanding cloud, the whole configuration of the whole cloud environment, knowing what is running, generally, right, is critical. But it's really, it's step one, right? So, as we get to this real-time visibility and move towards this kind of agent-based security profile, it really does, it substantially changes how we're going to deal with risk, right? The agent pulls in certain data, the scanners pull in certain data, the platforms correlate that data and really let you sit down and understand where your risks are. And it's really kind of the first time, in the whole DevOps cloud kind of world that we're finally able to do that, right? We're finally able to get visibility in all the nooks and crannies and corners of the stuff that's running in the cloud. So if we want to go on to the next one, this is kind of, I love this cloud angst, right? Because this is kind of where everybody was, and quite honestly, where a lot of folks still are, and it's really just, it's overwhelming. That first time you kind of get eyes on what is running in your environment, it takes your breath away a little bit, right? You're like, how did this happen? Right? We were all, happily running in our infrastructure, and all seemingly overnight, everything kind of just exploded. DevOps was on the scene, clouds, services up and down all over the place. So having that CSPM solution that to understand the configuration is really kind of, it's where we had to start, right? There's no kind of debate about that. We had to at least get visibility. So, once we got all of that working and really understood it, then we started asking for more, right? And it was basically, okay, we need to understand the workloads. Yeah, we know we got our kind of hands around the cloud environment, but what about these workloads? How do we know what's being run on them? How do we know are they, completely trusting every other workload in the environment? What kind of users are on there? What kind of apps are loaded? So how are we doing this, right? So as we move to the right, us traditionalists, really went, all right, we need that kind of solution, right? Which we got eventually, right? So now we're running one over here. We got one in the middle. We're looking at the workloads. We're looking at the clouds. And we're struggling now a little bit to get some of that correlation done, right? And understanding the risk relationships between what we're finding in the cloud environment, what we're finding on the workload. So as we come through and kind of adopt this, kind of CNAP model, that's kind of, nirvana for us. Looking at a single pane of glass, understanding what's going on inside the workload, how the workload looks from the outside, and tying that all together with the entire configuration of the cloud environment is really kind of what we now understand that we need. So kind of really coming along this maturity timeline, we're getting there, right? But we absolutely need an onboard agent to achieve that, right? There's just there's no argument about that. Aaron, any thoughts?
I think it's great, John. I wanted to too. We didn't touch a ton on it, but just as I'm looking at this slide, and again, the shift left capabilities, yes, but just the compliance needs too, right? As we get into NIST, NIST2, these frameworks that are coming down on us, and how important it is that our cloud is, yes, secure, but also meeting these, demanding compliance requirements too. Is this something that you've experienced or that your customers have experienced, is challenges with meeting compliance?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, NIST published their cloud security guidelines, and the way that whole model works is, NIST goes out, they look at technology, they publish their recommended guidelines, and then over the course of the 2 to 3 years after that, all of the regulators start using those guidelines when they walk into organizations, and they expect to see them in place, right? Or at least an effort to get them in place. And that's the same thing we've seen with cloud, right? NIST publisher guidelines, the regulators, the internal auditors are all now expecting companies to be able to satisfy those guidelines in some way, right? Yep. So, the regulators are coming in, they're when it comes to SOX or just, whatever it is now an expectation, right? Where, it wasn't that long ago where, the regulators were like, yeah, it's in the cloud, it's probably just a test, whatever it is. Now it's, okay, this is critical infrastructure for your company, for your business. If something happens in the cloud, you're going to, impact your revenue, potentially impact investors. This needs to be secure. So it really has transitioned over the last several years.
So, John, to wrap up here, based on your experience as a CISO, what should our audience take away from this session?
So, kind of the key in my, I think we need one more. Yeah, there we go. Look, the agent, it's not either or, right? You need both. You need to have the agentless scanning so you know what the environment's like. The agent provides you visibility of what's going on in the workload, attacks that are happening in the workload, all the fireless attack vectors and everything else that we we now understand we need to know in the workload. So you need both, right? It's not one or the other. Integration into the CI/CD pipeline is absolutely critical. Like I said, if you have, even if you have one release a day, which I don't know anybody who's only doing one release a day, if you have one release a day, you're still not going to be able to keep up with securing the environment, right? You're not going to get the configurations changed. You're not going to get the patching done. You're always going to be behind the ball. So get the integration, help the developers help themselves, right? Whether it's Jira or GitHub, whatever it is, help them know what to fix so it doesn't happen again, right? The real-time alerting is just the more, this is kind of like, the other end of the spectrum, right? We now know what's going on in the workload. Well, we now need people to react to it, right? Or we now need a way to react to it. So that real-time alerting that's coming out of the agents needs to have appropriate monitoring, right? One of the challenges we have with legacy security operations centers is, again, we knew when a server was going on board, we knew when it was assigned an IP address, we knew what it was running, so we could point the logs to the SOC, and everybody was happy. Now, with workloads coming up and coming down, dozens of times a day, we have some enterprises that, look for an 8 or 10 or 12x increase in number of workloads during certain times of the year, right? Retailers around holidays or, something like that. They have to be able to expand and contract in order to meet the business needs. So you need to make sure that when you're looking at the monitoring, you're tying it into whatever SIM you have, or, if you have the SOC you have, make sure you test that and really kind of do it to the right level. Embrace the automation. There's absolutely no doubt about that. You very easily, with some of these tools, can have a lot of the configuration drift addressed, right? If configuration drift in the cloud and the workload, if it's identified, you can alert to it. You can automatically fix it. There are a lot of things that you can do as part of being, again, tied into this whole DevOps lifecycle that will automate, so you don't have to worry about constantly running after. And finally, just don't forget about the microservices. More and more are moving to it. Whether they're in your cloud or somewhere else, make sure that all the microservices are being monitored and get the same kind of attention that you're giving the workloads.
Okay. All right. John, Aaron, appreciate the insight. We will now pause for a moment here, and John and Aaron will be available for questions.
All right, well, John and Aaron, I'm going to invite you back onto the screen with me. So let me just make sure everything is working the way it needs to. Hi, Aaron. Hi, John.
Hi, guys.
Awesome. So let's take a look and see if we've received any questions from our audience. First up, what are your thoughts on data security posture management and adoption timing in a CNAPP future?
Yeah, that's a great question. John, do you, again, given sort of your enterprise recommendations, any thoughts that you have there? I know it's a priority from the Aqua side, but curious on your thoughts.
Yeah, and it's absolutely something everybody's thinking about right now. The struggles over the last couple of years with multiple tools coming up with multiple messages and notification processes. The consolidation from in CWPP and it has to get to a point where it's a consolidated kind of one screen, a single pane of glass to get all of this information, right? Probably just based upon what we're seeing in the industry right now, I would say it's probably, most vendors would probably get to it within the next 18 to 24 months. I know kind of Aqua's leading the charge, but it really is something, it's becoming a critical roadblock in some of these enterprises because of the fractionated tools are just causing a lot of headaches. So having that single pane of glass is really something a lot of enterprises are looking for right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the priorities for Aqua, right? We hear a lot about consolidation, vendor consolidation, optimization. It's one of our big components. And so to your point, John, and sort of how you wrapped up with the presentation, right, is what enterprises should be thinking about. And as a former CISO yourself, right, like where we can start to consolidate tools, where we can start to see industry analysts like yourself start to recommend where these things fit in the larger part of CNAPP. So yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely where the market is headed and sort of one thing at a time, right? I know at our conversation, we talked a lot about cloud workload protection and cloud security posture management coming together, but I definitely see it as something that continues. And I think, Cody, we have another question about, it looks like about AI, if you want to throw that up on the screen.
Absolutely. So how do you see AI ML impacting cloud security posture management or the CSPM vendor capabilities?
Yeah, I can take the first pass, and then John, if you have any thoughts to chime in on. It's a main priority for Aqua. It's actually something that we just released as part of our attendance at Black Hat. And so that ability to remediate faster, the ability to use AI to make remediation recommendations is a big component of what we're working towards. And I'm sure as you may have noticed in our conversations today, right, it's not just about seeing more and prioritizing more, but it's about how much faster we can remediate and how much we can take the time off of the development team and of the security team, ensuring that we're, assessing the right issues as quickly as possible. So it's a big component of what Aqua's bringing to CSPM, and it's something that I believe we'll continue to see. Actually, if any of you have recently notice that there's a new GigaOM report, for example, and that's actually one of the leading leading innovator categories is the ability to bring in AI components. So big, I think it's going to be something we're seeing from a lot more vendors very soon.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, we all know the challenges security teams are having right now with resources and hiring and just finding people to address some of the work, right? So the more we can automate it and the more we can automate the decisioning that goes behind it, the better we're all going to be. And well, quite frankly, ML, that kind of modeling is set up very well to address a lot of the issues that come up day to day, right? So, I think it's going to make a substantial impact over the next several years. I do not think it's going to take away anyone's job. I don't think the DevOps teams need to worry about, AI writing their code. I do think, though, it's going to be a very well-received and long overdue tool that the security teams and the DevOps team can use to kind of get through some of the monotonous work that is kind of sucking the life out of everybody.
Yeah, good point, John.
So looking at our next question, and by the way, I can't believe we made it 40 minutes without talking about AI. So moving right along into our next question, is there any performance impact since you do scan APIs?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Not something that's been brought to our attention. I'm actually curious a little bit more information on that question, if the participant who asked could provide more detail. And if not, it's something we can certainly take back and get you an answer, but not off the top of my head, no.
Absolutely. So I am just going to take this time to give away a couple of gift cards and give our audience a second to send in any questions they have. We do still have some time set aside, everyone. So the 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card drawing, they are Yulia K, Henrik O, Anna M, and Ralph T. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. We'll be reaching out to you in the next 48 hours. If you don't happen to see an email come to your inbox, check your spam folder on the off case that it does get filtered out. All right, looks like we got another question. How does it act if my cloud inventory is very adynamic?
I'm not sure I can answer that question live. That might be one we need to take offline and get back to you. I'm not completely sure the exact question there.
Perfect. Yep. So if you do want to send in some more details about your question, our speakers will be receiving all of these questions and all of the chat after we conclude our program, and they can get back to you after the fact with some more detailed answers. John, I know you have a paper that's going to be coming out here pretty soon. Would you mind telling us a little bit about it?
Sure. So work with the folks at Aqua, it's really around the maturation of the CSPM space and kind of really the benefits that having real-time agents brings to, it's basically a synopsis of our discussion today. So that paper will be available in the coming weeks. And I'm sure the folks at Aqua will be happy to send it along to everyone. But one of the key components of that is really kind of an enterprise strategy around things to consider when deploying, when moving from agentless to an agent-based and combination architecture. So certainly it'll provide a lot of information around those enterprises who are considering the migration and really kind of dealing with a lot of the challenges that we were discussing here today.
And John, you go into a lot of detail, and I know I got a sneak peek of that report, but you highlighted at the end of this presentation sort of that enterprise strategy plan, right? So in that report, you actually go even deeper on what organizations should be thinking about, especially not just CSPM solutions, right, but CNAPP solutions, and what CISOs like yourself should really be considering when making purchasing decisions. So it's going to be an excellent report. I'm really excited to see it go live.
Yeah, thank you. It was a fun one to write, that's for sure. I love reports like that where, we can really see how the industry is changing and kind of map to it. That's the fun part of what we get to do.
Yep. Yeah. And cutting through the noise, right? There's a lot of FUD. There's a lot of confusion in the market sometimes. So
A lot of
clearing
fun.
that path.
Yeah. There's, So hopefully this will shed a lot of light for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to that one. And as Cody mentioned in the handouts, we do have an ebook, our real-time CSPM ebook. So again, talks through sort of the evolution that we talked through in the slides today. So where CSPM sort of started and where it's evolved, all the conversations we've had in the webinar today, sort of in print there for you in the handout section. If you all want to take a download, it's our first part of 2. Our second part will be coming soon as we talk a lot more about remediation, in particular AI remediation. So take a look at that handout and then stay tuned for the second part on remediation capabilities.
Awesome. Well, looking at our Q&A and our chat, it looks like we've exhausted all of our questions. So I do want to return the spotlight to each of you one last time. If there were any closing remarks, or maybe if you wanted to let us know where we can get started on the CSPM or CNAP journey, what are your final thoughts for us? Erin, do you want to start us there?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, we have a ton of great resources on the Aqua Security website, including our blog. That blog almost weekly, we have updates from our threat research team, Team Nautilus, as I mentioned. So there's great thought leadership pieces in there, as well as any important product information like our AI remediation capabilities. So definitely take a look. It's aquasecurity.com. Head over to the resource page. Again, blog posts weekly on all things cloud native. So definitely take a look there.
All right, John, you want to bring us on home?
Sure. I guess the only kind of parting words would be, when considering, any kind of cloud solution, especially like we're talking about today, be creative, right? Do not try to fit what you've been doing for 10 or 20 years in your infrastructures and try to make it work in cloud environment, right? Take advantage of the tool sets that you have. You have to look at what you have today. And this is kind of like being in security for all these years. We kind of get stuck in we've always done it this way model. And I don't think there's a better example of a time when you need to sit down and go, okay, we need to come up with a better way to do things than it is the whole cloud security space. So just don't get locked into the way you used to do things when you're dealing with cloud. You got an amazing set of tools out there to really solve a lot of the problems. So kind of adopt them and really kind of run with them.
Awesome. Well, Erin and John, thank you both so much for joining us live for this Q&A portion. Really great to get to know you before today and to learn from you today over this past hour. So thank you both so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you, Cody.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
So I would like to close things out by reminding everyone that our session was recorded. You will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or of course you can find it living on the Cloud Native Now website. That's cloudnativenow.com/webinars, and you'll find this living in the on-demand section soon. I'd like to thank Aqua Security for sponsoring our program today, and to everyone who's still here with us, stick around, because once I close this out, you will be directed to our survey, and we would love to hear your thoughts. Whether they are about today's program or suggestions for future topics, we would love to hear from you. Either way, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong Learning Experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Erin and John, thank you once again.
Thanks all.